Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Falade Bell. I'm the Director of Community for the Center for Communication. We are an independent nonprofit organization, and we connect students with media professionals to help better prepare them for their future careers. You can follow the Center for Communication on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @CINCOM, and today's hashtag is office hours. This program will be recorded for those who cannot tune in live. You can also watch our panels from recent seasons on our website, our YouTube, and Vimeo channels. And we plan to host more virtual programs in the coming weeks. So you can sign up for our newsletters, which lets you know about all the upcoming panels. And you can do that at centerforcommunication.org. So I'm so excited. Hey, Victoria. Many thanks to Victoria for joining us today. Victoria, before I say the bio that I have for her, she, as you can see from our sizzle reel, has been with us when she was a student attending our events, and she is someone that I truly love. Her energy is just the best. She's such a hard worker. I remember we had a VICE fellowship and Victoria applied, and I was pushing for her. Like, I was like, we must send her application to VICE. So I won't take responsibility for them hiring her, but I'm very glad that they did. I think she's awesome. And it's just been such a joy to watch her career, and I really cannot wait to see what she does from here. But she's basically now, she's a New York-based journalist and award-winning producer. She's covered domestic and international stories from breaking news and politics to music and entertainment. Victoria has booked and conducted live interviews with major public figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jay Balvin, and has been featured as an expert commentator on MSNBC Live, AM Joy, on NBC News, and Cheddar TV. Her work has been published on Bustle, Mic, Bloomberg, and Vice, and I won't share her most recent news that's coming up, but I'll turn it over to Victoria so that she can give an even better overview of her career. Victoria, go ahead and take it away.
Hey guys, thank you all for being here. You're so sweet. That was such a nice introduction. I'm so excited for all of you to be here and excited to share what I have for you. A little bit more about my career trajectory so far. As Falada said, I started as a VICE intern, and at the same time I was doing an internship for New York One, and I love my two internships. One was with the digital media, and then the other one was in the TV industry. And the VICE internship really captured my attention. So that's why I decided to come back after talking to my manager and asking if they would bring me back for a few other semesters. And ultimately, I ended up being at VICE as an intern for 3 semesters. After that, I was contacted by Bloomberg Media to come to the team as a full-time social editor. They were just launching TikTok, which is now called Quick Take, but it's basically a partnership between Twitter and Bloomberg. And I left VICE as an intern to be full-time at Bloomberg. At the time, I wasn't even out of college. So that was something that really pushed my career forward. And after my time at Bloomberg, I was there for about 9 months. After that, I was contacted by VICE News again, and they basically said, we have a bunch of openings. We remembered you. We want you to be on our team. And I, of course, said yes, because I loved the work that they were producing, and I really believe in the mission of the company. So I was at VICE News for almost 2 years, but most recently, I've gone freelance, and as well as mentioned, I have a new byline that it's coming out this week, and that's with Oprah Magazine. So I'm pretty excited as to how my career has gone, and I think it's a matter of, it's the beginning. I'm pretty young still, and I think there's only more to learn and there's more to do, and I am excited for myself. I am also excited for all of you who are just starting your careers, and I cannot wait to see all the questions that you have and all the good stuff that you're gonna do.
Awesome. Are you ready to get started? You want to take some questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, let's get started. Let's see. Our first question comes from Tasvia. Forgive me if I said your name incorrectly. Please correct me. Tasvia, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Miss Leandra. It's so great to meet you virtually. My name is Tasvia. Many people refer to me as Taz, and I attend John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. And my question to you is, do you encourage students who are interested in journalism to pursue dual degree graduate programs or particularly focus on one thing? I'm looking at a couple things. I'm currently part of my school newspaper right now, and I'm trying to get more pieces up so I can have my portfolio ready for grad school.
Nice to meet you. That's a great question, and I think it's a smart one to ask while you're in college. What I did as a college student is that my major was in journalism, but my minor was in digital media. So I was studying everything that had to do with Adobe Premiere, Photoshop, graphic design, video editing, etc. And that was really helpful because when I got out of college, I had some of those hard skills that employers are looking for. When it comes to a dual major, I would say that it makes sense if you major in something that you actually want to cover. So for example, if you want to be a political reporter, it would make sense for you to study something along those lines, as well as if you want to be an education reporter or an economic reporter, maybe you can study economics, just so that you have some background and some of the not the knowledge, but the language needed for covering those communities. I didn't do it because I wanted to basically focus on my minority communities of color. I am Latina, and I have a lot of sources in that realm, and I'm very open to speaking with other minorities like the Asian community and the Black community. So that's sort of like the expertise that I've sort of developed while outside of college. You can, I guess you could perhaps study gender studies, for example, if you wanted to become a journalist focused on women's issues. So I think those are my 2 cents. I didn't necessarily do it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. You have 2 ways. Either you develop the sources after graduation or while in school, or you study that you want to focus in and start developing those expert sources into your portfolio, as you well said.
Nice. All right, let's move on to the next question. Our next question comes from Evan. Evan, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Evan. I graduated from Cal State Long Beach in 2020 with a degree in documentaries. And I was wondering, when you were fresh out of college, when you were looking for jobs, did you try to look for entry-level jobs, like, like production assistant or intern, or did you just try to go for what you really wanted, like producer or editor or along those lines?
That's a good question as well. Interestingly enough, I ended up being a producer without actually following the producer quote unquote path. So for example, people will usually start being a production assistant, then an associate producer, and then a producer. But the way I do production is on the digital side. So not necessarily you have to follow that path in order to get to that producer role. And I think that's because when it comes to production, if you want to do production for a TV network, then you most likely have to follow that path. But since I was working with digital media advice, and I was working with Bloomberg, which was a brand new endeavor that they were just starting, it was sort of like a startup. So I didn't necessarily follow the path because I had the skills that they needed at the time. So a lot of the skills that I built while I was at college, it was social media skills. And basically both of my production roles have been focused on social media. So for example, at Twitter and Bloomberg, the partnership between the two, it was focusing on what stories would be trending online and producing those stories. And at VICE, what I would do is that I would produce social first content for our different media platforms. So that said is Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. I was working on a strategy for TikTok as well. So I think that when it comes to production, if that's what you want to do, then you don't necessarily have to follow the path if it's not within the TV industry and the broadcasting industry. But again, this has been my experience, and it's not necessarily, it has to be your experience. I know some of my colleagues, for example, they went through the typical and the classic routes of being a PA, AP, and then producer. And I actually think that's sometimes even better because you learn all of it from the very beginning. Sometimes if you're not a quick learner, then I think that's the best route to go. But if you're someone that is really entrepreneurial, for example, or that you can learn by yourself and in your own time apart and out of work, then perhaps you don't necessarily have to go to that route. But when you're actually coming out of college, a lot of the job postings that you would even be considered to would have to be entry-level positions because, for example, they would ask for minimum of 2 years of experience. So if you just got out of college, then that's what you have. So you don't necessarily, you won't even be considered for like an 8-year position as a senior producer. Even though that's what you want to do in the future, you still don't have the experience in the eyes of the recruiter.
Okay, cool. Our next question is, wants to remain anonymous, and they are at Amherst College. And they ask, how has social media served you as a journalistic tool? To what degree do you think building one's social media brand is important or even necessary to being a journalist in the digital age?
Mm-hmm. I am a big proponent on social media. So I'm very biased with my response. And I'm going to say it right here. If you have a chance to follow me on my social media, please do. For example, this is how I use my social media. On Twitter, I strictly share news and news updates. So for example, if I'm covering a story, I would put the coverage that I did for Puerto Rico mass protests last year. I was covering that story for my newsroom, and I use social media to drive millions of traffic into the website. And by doing that, I was also popping up in people's feeds, and that's how I was actually able to be booked as a MSNBC expert to talk about the situation going on in the island. So that's how I use my Twitter, for example. And my Twitter is at Leandra Reports. And then when it comes to Instagram, I use Instagram as a way to connect with sources. So a lot of people, now that I'm freelance, know that I freelance for different publications. And I receive a lot of pitches from different people, whether that is musicians or beauty brands or people who are in the community that have an issue that they want to highlight in their communities. A lot of people DM me about those things. So I've gotten story ideas from Instagram. And I think Instagram, the way I use it is to connect with the people that I would call my audience. So for example, first and foremost, I consider myself a journalist. I don't necessarily consider myself like a media personality as some of the other journalists who have a following do. But as a journalist on social media, on Instagram specifically, once I put up a story, I would link it on my bio, and I would say, hey, this is the story, my latest story for X publication. And a lot of people already know my work. A lot of people already share my work. So I'm bringing value to the brands that I'm working at because I'm already bringing the audience that I have. So as a journalist, I think it's important to also have an audience that wants the content that you're producing, because that way it's a little bit easier for you to I think that way it's a little bit, that's your hook to tell the story. Basically, you're the best person to tell the story because you already have an audience that cares about that story. And I think that's important when you're pitching to brands and publications. And
how did you start building that audience? Like, how did you build that audience up?
So it's an interesting question. I basically, when I was in college, I had a blog. And my blog, at the time, I wanted to be in the fashion industry. That's a long time ago. But I wanted to be able to cover New York Fashion Week. And I was brand new to the city. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So of course I didn't have any contacts at New York Fashion Week. So the best thing I did, or what made sense to me to do at the time, was to create a blog. Of course, the blog didn't have many people who were my followers, but a lot of people in my college followed me, and a lot of people from back home in Puerto Rico followed me because they were interested in the journey of being a Boricua from the island that moved to New York and is now making her dreams happen. So that's how I started building the following. People who knew me, but also people who were interested in what I was doing and the journey that I was embarking on. So at first it was me and my dreams of being in the fashion industry, working for New York for Fashion Week. And then I continued creating content that was geared towards more so the media industry. So for example, one of my most popular blog posts at the time when I was in college was how I got my internship at VICE. So for people my age, that were the people that followed me, that was important because people wanted to get internships, and especially internships at major media publications. So I think that you can start building your own audience by simply sharing what you're for and sharing what you're passionate about with the people that already know you. And the people that already know you will support you, and then they will share your content, and other people would see your content, etc. And I think it starts small, but then it just grows, and it's not going to happen in a year. At least it didn't happen in a year for me. I didn't go viral or anything. The almost 14,000 followers that I have on Instagram have been built up over the years. So I would say like 6 years, for example. But the good thing about that number is that even though it's not big, it's people who are loyal to me, who know me, and not necessarily because they saw a viral video 3 years ago. And I think that matters when it comes to people.
Okay, nice. All right, let's move on to our next question. Our next question comes from Dania, who is at Ringling College of Art and Design. She's an alum. Dania, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Victoria. Thank you so much for all this awesome wisdom and just tips on, how you got into the industry. So my question is, I guess you answered it a little bit by saying that like through Twitter, someone contacted you to be like a correspondent. And so I'm in the production field, and I have a hosting reel, and that's really where my passion lies. So I was really curious as how you get your foot in the door and how you're able to get on, these on camera or on these live stream interviews with these big companies, because New York it's really hard to get into a lot of these doors. And I'm just curious as to like what your advice is or how it happened for you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give you 2 ways that it happened for me. One of the ways that it happened for me was myself creating the way and not asking for, so there's this saying, right, that you don't have to ask for a seat at the table, you have to create your own table. So for me, a lot of what I've been ultimately doing has been that. So for example, with the pandemic, we were all at home, right? So it was a little bit extra time to think about what we wanted to do. And as you well said, I was also on the production path, but I had this little thing inside of me that really wanted to be on camera, for example. So what I did was that I created my own TV show on Instagram, and not TV, my own Instagram show, that it was live. So basically what I did is that I contacted everyone whom I knew in the entertainment world, and I said, hey, I am putting this together, will you want to participate? And a lot of huge major Latinx artists said yes. And the show is now bilingual. A lot of people connect to the different interviews. So I would say the average viewing, it's like 1,000 per episode, 1,000 people per episode. And it's good because that's a good way for me to build my following and also get some on-camera experience that I'm not asking for anyone's permission. So I am the producer, I am also the talent. So that's one of the ways that it happened for me. And then the other way that it happened for me is when you're a producer, you can say, hey, I'm envisioning this story to have an on-camera person. So I'm envisioning this story to have a correspondent or to have a host. And as the producer, it's difficult for you to also pitch yourself as the correspondent because it's just like two different roles. But if you're working on the digital media side, it's easier because as a producer, you can perhaps work with archival and then just shoot an intro for the piece. So for example, you would go into the studio, shoot your intro, your stand-up, and then you will go back to your desk and finish the piece. So that's a little bit of what you can do, and it's small steps. It's not necessarily that you were sent to Mexico to cover the border as a correspondent. We're not there yet, but at least you have some on-camera experience because you're using yourself as the host in your own stories. Does that answer the question?
I turned off her mic, but it sounds good. Feel free, anyone. This is a good transition to say if you guys have follow-up questions, feel free to ask a follow-up question. So our next question comes from Kritika, and Kritika is at Rutgers University. Kritika, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Victoria. So my question is, I'm an international student of communication and digital media is my specialization, but not exactly journalism. So my question, basically I have two questions. One is that, how can I get into the field of digital story making? Like what skills do I require to get into media companies like VICE? And since I'm an international student, are there any restrictions that, big publications like VICE think about taking international students? So, is there any restrictions there? So basically it's like two questions. Is it clear or do I repeat myself?
No, we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
First off, I'm so sorry with everything that's happening with the situation about the international students. I'm very sad to hear that you may be going through that. But now answering your question, I think that to get into the digital media side, it depends on what route you want to take. Like, it depends if you want to be an editor, it depends if you want to be a producer, it depends if you want to be a reporter. But it sounded a little bit more like you wanted to be a producer, I'm assuming. So it depends on the newsroom. So for example, at VICE, as a producer, you don't have to edit or you don't have to shoot. But at some other companies, you have to edit, shoot, and produce. So it really depends on what that company is looking for. And every newsroom is different. So the way you do this is in the job description, you can say, you would see if the requirements include editing experience and shooting experience. And if they do, then you know that they're looking for someone to do all three jobs. But if the production role, it's more so about script writing, booking, and handling all the post and pre-production, for example, then you know they are not necessarily looking for an MMJ, which is like a multimedia journalist. That happens a lot with smaller TV stations that basically want the reporter to shoot themselves on camera, but also edit themselves once they go back and then turn that package and bring it live to the audience. So basically, it really depends on the newsroom that you're working for. When it comes to international students, I'm not entirely sure I'm the right person to answer this because I've never dealt. I'm not considered, even though I'm from Puerto Rico, I'm not considered international. So I never had to deal with visas or anything. But from a colleague's experience, I believe she got her job while she was in her student visa, and that way her company didn't have to necessarily apply for the visa to like apply to get the visa for her. Again, I don't think I'm the right person to answer this, but this is just the experience that I overheard from a colleague of mine.
Nice. Okay. Our next question comes from Talia. Hope I'm saying your name correctly, from the New School. Talia, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, it's okay. My name is a bit hard to pronounce. It's Talia. Talia Novoa from the New School. And I wanted to ask you, as a Latina journalist, how have you bridged your two cultural backgrounds into your work, and how important has it been to recognize, being a Puerto Rican for your job?
100%. Like if I wasn't Puerto Rican, maybe I wouldn't be where I am today. And that is because I'm very passionate with the stories that I cover. So a lot of the stories I lean towards are, like I mentioned before, people of color, specifically Latinx stories. I love covering minority issues, social and political issues. So for example, when I was at VICE, I saw basically the need of the newsroom for more stories that are from our culture. So I saw that there was a lot of things happening in Dominican Republic, for example, in Puerto Rico, for example, the Caribbean, or for example, in Chile and in Venezuela. I think Mexico and Venezuela are the countries that are most covered and most quote unquote understandable to the American audience, but not necessarily the Caribbean countries. So I said, well, I have a lot of connections in that area, and I also have a lot of knowledge about what has happened in the past. I think that to cover those issues, you have to have some sort of previous knowledge or past history to understand them all. So I said, I think I'm the right person to cover the uprisings in Puerto Rico. I think I'm the right person to cover the protests in DR that happened earlier this year. And I advised I wasn't necessarily a reporter. That wasn't my 24/7 job. My 24/7 job was a social producer, but they didn't have anyone else. And it was a story that was being picked up by other media publications. And it was definitely a story that was gaining traction in the national mainstream media. So that's how I was able to put my experience and my persona and my knowledge into the job. And after that, then many other opportunities came about. And I think I always say this story because I think it's a powerful story about going after what you want, but also sort of like advocating for yourself. And I mentioned already last year during the Puerto Rico protests, when the Pueblo was asking for the resignation of the governor, Ricardo Rosselló, there was no other Puerto Rican in the newsroom, and the HBO team was going to depart, I believe it was the next morning, and they didn't have any of the sources already. And the Vice News Tonight on HBO team, basically they produce a show daily. So like they shoot that day and they air it that same night. So I said, well, it looks like you need help. So I didn't know the team. I worked with them in the same newsroom, but I knew of them, but they weren't necessarily close to me. So I went there to the desk very respectfully, and I said, hey, I heard that you're departing to Puerto Rico tomorrow. I'm Puerto Rican. I know there's a lot going on. If you need help, let me know. And they said, well, we actually do need help. So I think it's a matter of like being outspoken, but also being prepared for the opportunity. And I was able to connect them right there and there with the people who were part of the organizing team of the protests. And that was the first story that they aired on HBO that night. It was about the woman behind the Puerto Rico protests. And it was me who connected them. And it was me who ultimately ended up being the associate producer for those 3 newscasts on Vice News Tonight on HBO, simply because I went up there and I said, hey, do you need help? And they actually needed the help. It wasn't my job, but I went ahead and gave my skills. And I said, I'm here if you need me. So I think definitely you can bring your whole self to your work, if you're in the right place, they would appreciate you and your knowledge.
I love that. Great story. That's awesome. All right, our next question comes from Carlos. Carlos, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Victoria. So my name is Carlos Calderon. I'm going to LaGuardia Community College, and I'm part of the Media Makers Internship Program. And I'm very, very excited to be here in this Zoom meeting with you. I follow you on your social media, and it's great everything that you're doing for the Latino community.
Thank you.
And yes, I also was a boy that came here to this country when I was 17 years old. And I definitely want to know more about your journey. So my question is, since the media industry helps give representation to minorities, how do you think the industry can give more representation and opportunities to the immigrant Latino community and students in front of the camera, as well as behind the scenes? And how do you think students like me or us should do to get those opportunities?
That's a great question. And I think that sadly, what we see on TV and what we see on camera, it doesn't look like the country that we live in, right? There's a lot of representation that still needs to be implemented, and not only the Latinx representation, but also the Black representation, the LGBTQ community, the Asian representation, disabled people. There's a lot of communities that are not being portrayed in the media. And I think that this is something that is my personal thought, right? I'm not speaking to in regards to any publication. I'm speaking as myself. I think that sometimes we need to create our own space and not necessarily, like I said earlier, demand a seat at the table, but to create our own table. So for example, I've seen people have success going independent and pitching different stories to different media outlets. And that's why sometimes, and that is, I feel like sometimes when you're working at a newsroom, that newsroom wants you to do one job and not necessarily is the job that you want to do or that you see yourself doing in the future. So sometimes you have to depart and simply do what you want to do. So for example, if you want to cover the Latinx community, the immigration community, or if you feel that the newsrooms are covering that community, but they're not covering it correctly, then is there a way for me to fill in that gap? How can you, where you are today, fill in that gap? That could be as a freelance writer, that could be as a fixer, that can be starting your own YouTube channel. I know that sometimes, of course, when you start on YouTube, you won't have a following, but if you're creating good content, if you're creating a full-on production piece that has really good production value, and you send it to the right people and the right people share it, it's very easy for something to go, not easy, but it's possible for something to be picked up online and for your piece to be trending online. So for example, a lot of the times that we see these viral videos, they don't necessarily come from a media publication, they come from individuals like you and me. So is there a way for you to fill in the gap from where you are today, whatever you have today, no matter the resources? I think it's a question worth asking ourselves. And I think for me, it's also a question that I'm asking myself. How can I continue doing this and continue advocating for what I want to see? I feel like sometimes it's hard to get in the door. So maybe you don't get in the door and you just build your own little house.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Nandi. She's at St. John's University. Nandi, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Victoria. I just was wondering about a few of your challenges that you had as a freelance journalist. I know that that's just you setting up your own pretty much and then having what's necessary in order for organizations to even look at your work and everything. And then I did have a second question about you working as a full-time journalist as well. having studies as a student in a college. So
What can you concise the question?
So what were a few challenges that you had as a freelance journalist?
So there are many. I think sometimes people say, oh, when you're a freelance journalist, it's great because you're your own boss. Yes, that's good. But I think the primary challenge is the fact that you get what you put in. So for example, if you're working hard, then that week might have been great. If you didn't work as hard the next week, be sure that a paycheck is not going to be there because you're not with a full-time, you're not in a full-time role. So I think it's a matter of keeping the momentum going, and it's also a matter of discipline. More so than motivation, it's about discipline. So like you being your own boss, but you're also your own employee. And I think that's something that many of us freelancers are working towards. It's not always wake up at 7, have coffee and start working. Maybe that day you didn't feel like it and you have the luxury to take a walk at the beginning of the day and then work later. For example, me, I get creative late at night. So it's difficult because during the day, sometimes I wake up early, read a book, go to the gym, and then at night at like 11 and 1 a.m., that's when I want to do my work. But it works for me because I am the one setting up my own hours. And if I'm handing in the stories on the deadline, then it's fine. So I think that's one of the main challenges. Basically, how hard you are working means how hard or how rewarding the compensation is going to be. It's hard because you have to be your own boss, but also your own employee. So you have to set rules within your schedule and rules within your own family and friends. Sometimes people don't understand what you do, and they would say, oh, well, you're not working a traditional quote unquote job, so you have the time or you have the bandwidth to do X, Y, and Z. But you have to sort of determine those boundaries too. So I think those are my two primary challenges, or the two primary challenges that I see from other colleagues that are also freelancing. And third,
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
And third, the fact that you have to learn how to deal with rejection. So for example, a lot of people, when you pitch, they don't respond, or simply editors take a longer time to respond, and you would want them to say if they're interested in your pitch or not, but they're busy with other stuff too. So I think it's a matter of like not getting frustrated with the fact that your pitches are not going through, or the fact that you're not being assigned anything. I think that's the third one.
I think just really quickly, her last follow-up question was like, how did you manage your studies and then as a full-time journalist? Because I do think you were doing journalism, and then how did you manage that schedule?
I see. So my full-time role at Bloomberg, it was from Wednesday through Sunday. So I was working the week with the weekend team. So I had different hours. I wasn't working Monday through Friday. So that was something that really helped. And then when it comes to the studies, I was in my last semester, and I believe I took a lot of the credits in previous semesters. So I didn't have as many credits needed in order to graduate. I believe I only had 2 classes going on, or 2 or 3 classes going on. I had 3 classes going on while I was full-time at Bloomberg. And one of those classes was at night. And then the other 2 classes were Monday and Tuesday. So basically I was studying Monday, Tuesday, going to work Wednesday through Sunday, and then one of those weeknights I had a night class. So it wasn't hectic. I didn't have time for many things, but it was doable because I was able to work out my schedule.
Nice. Okay, our next question comes from Jordan. I believe graduated this year from Gettysburg College. Jordan, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Victoria. So yeah, I did just graduate this past May, and the pandemic has really gotten in the way of my job search. So I wanted to ask you, as someone who has experience with so many different media organizations. Do you have any insights on when things might start going, quote, back to normal and companies might start hiring again?
That's good, and I don't think any of us know. I don't think any of us know for sure when things will go back to normal. I don't think there is actually a back to normal situation. I think this is a new situation that we need to deal with. So I'm assuming that you want a full-time role. I would say continue applying. I saw a lot of job openings at, I'm not sure if these are the industries or the companies that you would be open to, but I saw a lot of entry-level openings at NBC, for example, or at CNN. So you may be able to check those out. But if not, I would recommend you connect with editors on Twitter. So for example, when you connect with an editor on Twitter, you have their email in their bio, and start thinking about what kind of stories you want to cover. Or maybe you have a story that it's an exclusive that you would be able to get information that they don't have. And it doesn't hurt to send them an introduction email and also say, hey, I would love to go out and report this for you. I wouldn't necessarily tell them that you just graduated. Instead, show them the experience that you've previously had. So for example, maybe you had an intern, or maybe you have a clip from your school newspaper that may be helpful when it comes to them writing your stuff. I think most of the times publications want to know that you can perform in the job. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've done the job before, but that you have the skills to succeed in the role. And if not, that you can learn. So I think as an entry-level position, it's important to show them, hey, I may have not done this before, but I may do this because I have X, Y, and Z skills that will allow me to make this happen for you. So one, keep applying. And second, start pitching to different publications. And how you can do this is by connecting with editors on Twitter. And that way, maybe you may not have a full-time job within the next 5 months, but that's my primary advice. And of course, then this is something that I still haven't done and I have to do, and it's on my to-do list, but revamp your website. So many companies ask for a website, and the LinkedIn is good, but the website, it's just showcasing all that you can bring to the table. So if you haven't done that, please do that, because it's like super important for a lot of these companies.
And if you guys aren't following Victoria, check the chat. We put in her Twitter, her Instagram. She knows what she's doing there. All right, let's keep it moving. We have a lot of questions. Our next question comes from Sarah. Sarah, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to say it's incredible to have the opportunity to meet a successful Latina in the media industry. So just thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk to us. So as far as my question goes, what work experience, internships, like past jobs, anything that you've done, what do you feel has best prepared you for your current job as a social producer?
That's a great question. But I think what comes to mind, like the first thing that comes to mind, is that I have no shame in like coming up to people. And I think in this industry, you have to be that way. So for example, the way I ended up at VICE, or in the VICE radar, like Fola said, I applied for a VICE fellowship. I actually didn't get the fellowship, but what I did was that they did an on location at the company. So I went to the on location, and I quickly realized who was the hiring manager for the internships. I went up to her and I said, hey, I'm Victoria. I would love to work here. I brought a copy of my resume and I gave it to her. So this is a great way for you to meet someone who would have a say in your career in real life and introduce yourself. And it's like weird to come up to people randomly and say, hey, I admire you, or hey, I love your work, but you never know what that can lead towards. Maybe that didn't lead me anywhere, and that would have been okay. But maybe it led me to where I am today. And I think it's important, for example, what I was just saying earlier about coming up to my team and then being the associate producer for 3 newscasts on HBO. I actually didn't want to go up to the team because I was like a little bit, I don't know, I was feeling timid at that day. And my colleague was like, why are you feeling this way? They actually need you, so just go. And I went there. So I think sometimes we have to take away like some of the fears that we have to meet people or like to introduce ourselves to people and just get out there, because the worst thing that could happen is that they don't answer. But then the best thing that could happen is that they connect you with someone else, or that they give you a tip, or that they say, actually, we need someone like you. So I think that's something that it's not taught in school. It's something that it's sort of like innate in you, but it's also something that you can learn. And it's something that if you just forget about how you look and how you feel and how you would present yourself, and you just go out there and introduce yourself, many things can happen.
And just to add on to that, Victoria used to come to like as many events that she could of ours. I know that we don't have in-person events right now, but I know that if this was happening while she was still in school, she'd be on every virtual event. She reached out to me. She actually, that blog that she talked about, she started writing for our site. You know, we do that a lot. I put out things in our newsletter that says, hey guys, we want to spotlight and get you guys hired. And she started writing articles and stuff for our site, you know, and I push those things out. And, you know, we have a large newsletter audience, and I'm always happy to promote our students because I want you guys to get hired. So like she said, reach out to people. You can reach out to me, reach out to her, get on LinkedIn. We believe in you guys. All right, you guys, there's so many questions. Victoria is very popular. We're gonna take 3 more questions. So I'm really sorry to everyone whose question can't be answered. But we're gonna have 3 more questions. Our next question comes from Cassie, and she is at Rutgers University. So hold on, I pulled up the wrong person. Oh no, Catherine, maybe she goes by Cassie. Catherine, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so it is Catherine, but my nickname is Cassie. Victoria, thank you so much for being here today. I'm a rising sophomore at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and I actually just declared my major and my minor. So I'm very excited about that. I'm majoring in communications and I'm minoring in digital communications, information and media. And it's a big field. So I wanted to ask you, how did you decide what area of the communications field that you wanted to focus on? And then I know you talked about your VICE internship a lot, but were there any other things that helped influence what you wanted to do, such as internships or on-campus experiences like extracurricular activities?
Mm-hmm. Great questions. Let me sort of like divide them in my head. So one of them was, I forgot. The first one.
So how did you decide what area of the communications field you wanted to focus on?
Got it. Okay. So I actually didn't study production. I just studied journalism, text journalism. And the way I fell into the social media world, which at the time wasn't something that you really studied in college, was that when I applied to the VICE internship, they saw that I had a blog and they saw that I was building a following. So basically they said, okay, well, I'm not sure if they said this, but I guess that they said this in their heads. Well, you're building a following. Why didn't you come and build a following for us too? You're a young person and this is the audience that we want to build, young people. And that's how I sort of got my feet at the door at VICE. I didn't study. I didn't have any social media experience professionally. And I didn't have any certifications or anything. So within social media, that's how I landed at Bloomberg for this new partnership with Twitter that was primarily telling the news, breaking news, and covering breaking news live on Twitter. So it was news, but it was within social media. And at Bloomberg, I realized, I don't want to be so much on the social media editing side, but I want to be more so on the production side. So that was something that I learned on the job. In college, I actually didn't know what a producer was exactly. So when I was at the job at Bloomberg, I said, okay, now I want to be a producer. What should I do to get to that route? And I started talking to the video team and I said, hey, will you let me contribute some of the pieces? Perhaps pieces that are about Latin America. I've contributed some pieces about Puerto Rico, some about Mexico. I would do voiceovers for the FIFA World Cup, but about the FIFA World Cup when Mexico was playing with Colombia, for example. And that's how I got some of my clips. And it was with those same clips that I applied to the job at VICE, basically arguing that I was creating content for social media and that I therefore was producing content, so I could do the production role. While I was at Bloomberg, I wasn't necessarily a producer, but I already wanted to produce, so I was creating some of that content already on my Instagram. So that content on my Instagram, I also included on my application to VICE. So it was a little bit of me sort of building my own portfolio and me moving through the newsroom asking, hey, how can I grow into this? But I didn't, like I said, I didn't start as an AP or as a PA. I started in social media, but my path has sort of taken me into the production role. And I think it's very important for young people specifically to be flexible with what they want to do and to be flexible with the title that they want to have. Because ultimately, if I would have said no to that social media role because I didn't want to do social media, then it wouldn't have landed me the production role. And maybe my next role, if it is full-time, it's a different role, that it's not in social and it's not in production. But I think this industry, you need to learn so much in order to continue growing and in order to continue innovating, because it's a very innovative industry. So if a job description sounds good, but it's also challenging, apply, because they may need those skills, but you can also learn some of those skills at the job.
Yeah, excellent. And just to just add to that a little bit, it's always also about how you frame it. So the way you framed it was perfectly. So a lot of times, a lot of students will ask us certain things about their resume because they don't think it applies, but it does apply. Just based off what Victoria just said, you know, you can frame things in a certain way that you probably didn't realize, and that allows you to get the next job. Mm-hmm. So last two questions. Our next question comes from Katarina, and she just graduated from NYU. Katarina, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. And so my question is about being pigeonholed. And so how do you prevent being pigeonholed? I'm someone who has a lot of internship and academic background with video and video journalism. And I know that that's how I'd get my foot in the door, but eventually I want to be able to also write articles and try some other things to A, figure out what I like, and B, just expand my skill base, expand my reach. And so my question to you was, how do you prevent that being pigeonholed like that? How do you remember to break out of that cycle of always doing the same thing?
That is a great question. And I think it's something that people like us who do multiple things are sort of dealing with. For example, like you well said, and you do, for example, I write, I produce, I can also be on camera, I can also report enterprise stories, and I can do social media. So it's like, how do I describe myself? Because I can do a little bit of everything. I'm not gonna say I can do it all because there's a lot more to learn. But I think it's important to ask yourself, what do you want to do next? So for example, if you're a producer right now and most of your experience is in the production world, you have clips that say that you produce X, Y, and Z. But now you wanna be a writer. So how do you make that leap? Maybe it is in your newsroom asking the editors on the website, hey, is it possible that I contribute one weekly article? I would love to get my hands on some text. I would love to get some written stories out there apart from videos. That's if you're in the newsroom. If you're not in a newsroom right now and you are out of college, for example, but you have a lot of experience on the production side as an intern, but you want to be a writer now, start pitching. When you pitch, people are not asking for your age. And people are not asking for your resume when you pitch to an editor. They ask for your website and they ask for your past work to see that you can actually deliver. So when you're pitching written stories for a different outlet, then you can say, hey, I've published this. My expertise is primarily in video, but I wrote the scripts in this video so they see that you have those writing chops. And I wrote this blog post, if you have. Just like I mentioned earlier, how can you frame different things that you've done to be particular about what you want to do next? And that way, you would be able to get some clips as a freelance writer. So once you have those clips, you're already a writer because you freelance for different publications. So it's about continue building up that portfolio.
Nice. And our final question comes from Helena, and she is a recent Columbia grad. Helena, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi there. I just have a question about how to set up a demo, especially during COVID. As an aspiring news on-air reporter, and I have experience prior to coming to grad school, I'm conflicted about how to highlight your personality while also sort of remaining, neutral and maybe fitting into a mold that is traditional for on-air reporters.
That's a good question, and I think it depends on what area of journalism you want to be in. So for example, if you want to be a news reporter, you won't necessarily show your personality in the reel. But if you want to be an entertainment reporter or a culture reporter, then for sure show as much personality as you want. So I would recommend having 2 reels, one that is more newsy and then one that is more personality and just with a touch of who you are. I think that's the best advice that I can give you. For example, the news one, of course, the tone of the rhythm, it's more serious. The stories that you're putting out there are more serious, perhaps like breaking news, for example. But when it comes to entertainment and culture, it's more upbeat. The music is more upbeat. You have like different clips. You don't necessarily have to use the newsy reporter voice. You can be personal. You can be cool. It really depends on how you see yourself. Like the entertainment and culture one could be for Complex, for example, and then the newsy one can be for a local NBC affiliate.
Nice. So that was our final question. This has been really amazing. Any final thoughts for our attendees?
I see that there's like 30 questions that were left unanswered. So if you have a question that you want to ask me, or if you want to connect with me, if you want to chat about different things that I can perhaps like guide you and help you with, I am reachable. Find a pen and paper so you can write this down, but you can reach me on Instagram. I'm there all the time. And my account is Victoria Leandra. It's exactly the name that I have down here. On Twitter, Leandra Reports. And then my email is vlhm13@gmail. You can ask those questions there and maybe we can set up another time to chat. And then for wrapping thoughts, I am super excited to meet you all. I feel like all the questions were amazing and I'm just so excited to see that there are so many passionate people in this industry. The industry needs many more of us. Young people who are driven, who are hungry, and who want to make media a better place. I think one of the questions that was asked earlier is how can we change the industry? And by doing things like this, by connecting with each other And by advocating for each other, that's how we change this industry into the industry that we want to work in. And I think it's a great time for the industry in the sense that it's been going through a lot of reckoning. A lot of things have been happening in different media companies that it was just about time for them to happen. And I think it's the best time to join journalism and the media industry. So I'm proud of you for just being here and showing up, and also be patient. I think patience is key. And maybe what took me 5 years, it's gonna take you 2, and vice versa. Maybe what took you 2 years, another person may take them 10 years. So don't compare yourself with someone else's journey. Just stick to your journey and continue working. If you work in this industry long enough, something is gonna come out of it. So
absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love it. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. Just a couple of quick things for everyone still on. We do have a diversity summit coming up, so that's really exciting. Who knows, maybe you'll see Victoria there. You know, she just dropped a whole bunch of gems. So we may need to bring her back for that. So stay tuned for that. We're hoping to do that sometime in September. We will have our next office hours in 2 weeks. And so look forward to seeing someone from Twitter, that would be Avery Friedman, and someone from Pineapple Media, that's a podcast company, and that will be Maria Robbins Somerville. So please sign up for our newsletter at centerforcommunication.org so that you can get all of our updates about upcoming things. And feel free to donate. We are a nonprofit organization and we want to keep these things free. So go to centerforcommunication.org/donate. See you next time. Bye, guys.